Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here with us.
First off, a couple of quick housekeeping things. We're recording this workshop. If you'd prefer to not be recorded, feel free to turn off your cameras. Otherwise, we'd like to ask that you leave your cameras on. We'd love to see your beautiful faces, the artwork that you're creating, and help this workshop feel more like a community rather than a bunch of blank boxes. Please do, however, keep yourself muted throughout the workshop. And then, of course, there'll be time to unmute and ask questions and chat with us. For those of you that don't know us, I'm Erin with 1111, a creative collective. We're an LA-based nonprofit arts organization that works to empower our people, our planet, and our legacy through public art and arts-related programming. One of our core programs is Valley Art Academy, founded by Miles Lewis. For locals, as well as those outside of LA that would like more information about in-person and virtual weekly workshops and youth and teen art classes, please get in touch with us directly or visit valleyartacademy.org. And we'll put that in the chat as well. We're excited to see so many people from all over the world joining us today. This is really great. This workshop is part of a larger program that combines large-scale mural production around Los Angeles with a series of art workshops. In collaboration with special guests from local and global environmental organizations, we hope to educate, inspire, and empower the public to not only be protectors of our planet and ecosystems, but to also see that art can be used as a very powerful tool for advocacy. We'd like to thank the California Arts Council and the Ruth and Joseph Reed Foundation for the Arts for supporting this program. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce artist, educator, and activist Miles Lewis and the co-founder and policy director of Kiss the Ground, Finian Makes Peace. Thank you both and enjoy.
Finian, who's going to talk about soil health and microorganisms, and then we're going to get into our watercolor exercise. All right, so I'm going to begin with sharing my screen and then presenting. Is that clear to everybody? Does that work? Okay. All right, so this is the mural that we produced in Hollywood on Larchmont Boulevard. It's called Kiss the Ground, and it is sort of the big piece that starts off this workshop series. So what it's depicting is people sort of blowing carbon or carbon dioxide back into the earth and investing it into the soil, mixing it into the soil, keeping it there. What you can see is people sort of blowing carbon that is then moved through roots that are picked up by mycorrhizal fungi that is then pushed into these layers of carbon and healthy soil. So it's all about people coming together to make the soil healthy and to make our planet healthy. So 3 things about this that we'll be touching on in the larger presentation on art is that, for one, it's a little bit of a scientific diagram in that it's showing you something that is invisible and making it visible, right? All of these really small creatures, things like carbon, we don't actually see with our eyes, but something that art lets us do is make those things that we can't see into things that we can understand in visual terms. We also have, of course, the whole group of people, because when we're talking about environmental subjects, whether it's taking care of animals, or it's planting trees, or it's helping the oceans, we're talking about people figuring out how to do that in the best way possible, people figuring out how to be better to the planet. And so kissing the ground is a really essential part of this entire depiction. And then language, we'll be using a lot of language today to talk about how to do visual things when we're going through the watercolor workshop. So this is a quote from Rumi, who's a Persian poet from I think about 1,000 or 1,200 years ago. And it's, "Let the beauty we love be what we do. There are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground." Kissing the ground, of course, exists in most cultures, most religions, and most philosophies as a really deeply respectful way of living with the earth and of respecting other people. And so I thought this was a really nice combination of a few different ways to talk about how we can live with the earth. So that is the mural. Just to give you some sense of how we put it together, we actually have, I think we have these 2 kids might actually be on the call right now. These are 2 of my kids who joined me at Valley Art Academy, are learning drawing and painting, and they joined me in mural production. Starts with line drawing, of course, and filling in colors. It starts off pretty rough, and then as we're moving through the weeks of producing the mural, it gets tighter and tighter. And this was Brenda Cibrian, who is an artist in Southern California as well, who helped me with the lettering portion of it. So she came in the final few days to get all that done and out there. All right, so that's the mural. So very quickly, this is me. So I'm an artist, art educator, and environmental educator here in Los Angeles. I'm from the San Fernando Valley and still live here. I tend to do a lot of portrait work. I do some freelance illustration work and increasingly murals. And then, of course, I've been an art educator for a while now. These are my kids with me at the Getty Center here in Los Angeles. These are some murals. If you want to find what I do, you can find me at the website and that Instagram handle. These are some just larger images that are not particularly portraits, but give you a sense of some of the different types of imagery that I deal with. Okay, so now we're just going to do a very quick discussion of how art connects with nature. So, of course, the primary way that art connects with nature is that we draw things that are natural, right? So most paintings and drawings are full of things that we're able to observe in the real world. These are two really ancient examples of this kind of activity. On the left-hand side is a still life with unripe peaches. It is a fresco painting on a wall done in Herculaneum, which was kind of blown to smithereens by a volcano about 2,000 years ago. So this was actually painted just before that happened, and it was protected by the ash. But the living room that it was in, again, 2,000 years ago, was full of these paintings of still life, of fruit, of vegetables, of animals, of landscapes. And one of the basic ways in which we come to appreciate the things we have is by looking at them, talking about them, painting them, writing music about them. Art helps us to get closer to what is most important to us. On the right-hand side, we have some Egyptian hieroglyphics. So most languages, language systems, written language around the world begins with some kind of pictograph or pictogram. So when you look at Chinese lettering, or you look at Egyptian hieroglyphics, or you look at the ancient American written forms, it begins with something that exists in nature. It's a form of a bird. It's a form of an eye. It's a form of a river, or of plants, or of stars. So our appreciation and observation of nature gives us all of the basics that we have in everyday life. Here are two decorative items from ancient Mesoamerica. So on the left-hand side, from Teotihuacan in Mexico, is one of the heads from the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, one of the ancient structures, I think of the Aztecs. And of course, throughout history, we've created monsters by combining natural things. So in this case, birds and serpents. It's often a way that we create gods. On the right-hand side, a bat ornament, which is probably like a hoop earring, or it was worn in some other way, maybe on a necklace. And this is the Moche culture of Peru. And then some examples from the Far East. So on the left-hand side, this little sort of study guide, different sketches of marine life by Katsushika Hokusai, who was working about 200 years ago. And he also created drawing manuals. So he helped other artists figure out how to draw natural things. That's been a large part of these traditions all around the world for a long time. And on the right-hand side, a really lovely painting from the Song Dynasty, which is about 1,000 years ago, by, Wang Zhiming, 1,000 Li of Rivers and Mountains, one of the great periods of Chinese landscape painting, which influenced so many other forms of painting as these kinds of images got around the world. But a real love, both of these artists are cultivating a real love of the natural world. Okay, so in addition to using nature in order to create pictures at all, and to create our language and to create so many other things, we also use images to make the invisible visible. This is most obvious in science and natural history. This is a beautiful set of images, these two, from an educational, or a set of educational books that came out in the 1890s in America called Yagi's Natural History. In this one, you have a geological chart, which is showing you all of these different strata of the Earth. Some of them are correct, some of them are incorrect, but they're trying their best to help people understand what the Earth is composed of. You also have different kinds of cloud formations. This is an especially beautiful one that is showing you the planetary system. So this was going out to high schools, 130 years ago to get them excited about and involved in discovering nature and understanding nature. Around this planetary system, you have different solar and lunar activities. So you have an eclipse of the sun, you have a meteor shower, you have the moon, shadow cast on the moon, zodiacal light here. Really interesting, complex, and inviting ways of getting involved in science. Of course, medical illustration is a big part of that too. Again, making the invisible visible. All of us have bodies, but we've only known how our bodies work for a very short period of time. We only know about the inside of our bodies for a couple hundred years. So these are two kinds of medical illustration that, of course, have been used by scientists and doctors in order to create medicine as we know it. You have super simple diagrams and drawings, right? Even though this just looks like a scientific diagram, it is a line. It is an abstract idea here. It's a design that's telling us a lot about something that is completely basic to the universe, from radio waves all the way through to X-ray and gamma rays. And then, of course, looking into cells. I'm sure all of you guys, if you've done any kinds of science classes, you've used microscopes. And so microscopes have been one of the most obvious ways that we've made the invisible visible, going from an animal cell to a plant cell. And this is a very recent, I don't know if any of you guys have seen this, but this is a very recent, I guess this is what the most recent technology allows us to see of the human cell. This is the interior of the human cell. This is a photograph. It's not a painting or a diagram. It is, I think, colored so that you have different areas that we can differentiate from each other. But it just shows us things that we would never see otherwise, and it helps us to look and learn much more deeply than we would. Okay, so what we're going to be painting today is the soil and microorganisms. So the soil is extraordinarily important in environmental terms and in fighting climate change, but it's also really beautiful, right? There's a universe above us. We talk about the universe above us, and there's a universe below us that we talk about a lot less. And that's what we'll be painting. But before we get to that, I'm going to hand it over to Finian, who is the co-founder and the educational director of Kiss the Ground, which works on these issues, to give you a presentation on the subject that we will be painting. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing here, and I'm going to hand it over.
Thanks, Miles. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. I wanted to just start by checking in to art and artists in the world. Miles and I talked about how often these different sectors of the world, whether you're in policy or a government, or whether you're in business, or whether you're in sports, or whether you're in art, oftentimes we silo off, and what ends up happening is that we miss huge opportunities for artists to be included in really important things. And so the first thing I want to offer to each of you is art is so important culturally, of course, but also in how people who are in decision-making positions are moved or inspired to shift what they might be deciding. So forever, art has held this important role, whether you're talking about the paintings that were done of people and realistic, or animals or nature that Miles brought up to shift how people were experiencing something. Here in the United States, when we had Ansel Adams taking photographs of the West to preserve these areas that were going to get logged and taken down, he moved people, inspired them, and to see beauty in this so that something else happened. So the role of art is so important for giving people an insight and inspiration, a context, and sometimes pushing their buttons, sometimes making them a bit uncomfortable so they see something differently. Even the jester at the Kingdoms was there to give perspective that otherwise would have been left out. So I just want to be really clear that our society today misses often because artists aren't included in these areas where decision making is happening. So when you're an artist, you're also a contributor to what society is going to be doing and the decisions it's going to be making. So with that, as Miles was saying, is making the invisible visible, but also giving context, giving meaning, waking people up, and getting people to feel. All those things are so important for helping society as a whole get new opportunities, especially as something as big as what we're about to talk about now. So talking about what if we kissed the ground? What if we had this new relationship? What if we could understand what we don't understand, but also experience a new mindset towards our Mother Earth? Kiss the ground, our mission is to awaken people to the possibilities of regeneration. And it's really crucial that, I believe it's really crucial that humanity starts to understand and comprehend the potential and the opportunities of regeneration. And that's why we take this could be considered art, I guess, but it's challenging the norm right now, which has sustained. I don't know if everyone has a show of hands of how many people have heard about the UN Sustainable Development Goals or have heard about sustainable as the best option for humanity. We have to be sustainable, right? We've all heard that. But does sustainable really make sense? So we're arguing it doesn't. And this is where we're using art in my own way here to indicate that sustainable isn't the right answer. Because right now, 75% of land around the world is termed degraded. And we've lost 1/3 of farmable land in the past 40 years alone. Every year we're losing an area the size of England of farmable land that's in farming becomes too degraded to farm anymore. That's what humans are doing to the planet as we speak. So the idea of sustaining this doesn't really make sense. And here's another way of looking at it. For most of you who don't know about this, if you're younger, agriculture has arguably been around with humanity for 10,000 so years. So in most places around the world, as populations got bigger and humans were trying to feed themselves, they were degrading the environment, the natural resources around them, the soil, the biomass, etc. They were degrading it as time went on. So we're now in this place where 75% of land is degraded. And this is a question, this is another form of art, I guess, where you're saying, that's where we are, let's get a hold of that and then check into sustainability. Does it really make sense? And it doesn't. And that's where we're saying, and this is where you can use art and illustration to get people to grasp the severity of where we are. Therefore, regeneration has to happen first, and then we can sustain. And this is really another look at it, bringing the invisible, making it visible. And what's interesting about this is a lot of us have seen this, like, Miles or anyone else on the call, you've seen this, right? You've driven past this. But this is where I wanted to emphasize context. So if you see bare ground on the top left, is that just farming to you? Is that just the desert? Or are you now seeing it as humans degraded the land, so now it's vulnerable to wind erosion? Are you driving past a CAFO and just saying, "Ew, that stinks"? Or are you saying, "Oh my gosh, that's one of the most destructive forces on the planet right now when we do this with animals instead of doing planned grazing or another form of agriculture that's helping to regenerate"? Are you seeing muddy water on your left? Are you seeing that and saying, that's not okay? We're losing 4 tons of topsoil per acre per year to erosion on our agricultural land. So now when you see muddy water, you're not just going to say, "Oh, look, muddy water." You're going to say, that means we're losing precious topsoil from our farmland, which is degrading our farmland. So you start to see things differently when you point them out. And that's where the artist mind is really crucial. I come from a musician artist background. My dad was a portrait artist. And I got into soil health about 8 years ago. But I remember I was talking at a university, Davis in California, and these professors of soil science were at one of the lectures I was giving, and they've been doing this stuff for 25 years. And they wrote me an email the next day, which was so profound for me, because they said, "We drove back from the event And for the first time, we looked at bare ground and realized it was a problem. And these were two gentlemen who've been studying soil science for years and years and years. So as an artist, sometimes we have the ability to see context differently than other people. So remind yourself that your view, your ability to see things as an artist is sometimes different than those making decisions. Another quick analogy here. Here's some art to show that soil is broken. Humans have broken how soil is supposed to work. Soil is supposed to absorb water. A good healthy piece of soil holds 20 times its weight in water. So like a cup that's designed to hold water that gets broken, the cup no longer serves its function of holding liquid. And soil's the same way. And we're saying, wait a minute, instead of trying to get the best out of the broken cup that we can, what if we rebuilt the cup? What if we glued the cup back together? And I want to pause for a second. This is the big news. Soil is broken, just like the cup, and we can take carbon from the atmosphere, push it through plants, as the mural showing. Plants pump carbon into the soil, and we can literally glue the soil back together so it functions again. So the carbon in the atmosphere is the glue that glues our soil so it functions again. So we can regenerate Earth. Remember, regeneration means something is getting better back to its highest functioning state. If a lizard loses its tail, for any kids on this call, right? You know that the lizard grows its tail back. It regenerates its tail so it's a fully functioning lizard again. When we have broken, degraded land, we can regenerate it so that the land functions again. And that's why regeneration is so important versus sustaining the broken state we already have. We can rebuild soil, and that's a huge opportunity. And the problem is the solution. That's what's so exciting. All of us are aware, most of us are aware, I guess, that there's a blanket being created of carbon dioxide that's heating up our planet because there's more and more carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. It's causing a thermal blanket around the Earth that's holding more heat in, so our globe is heating up. We need that carbon to be pumped through plants into the soil. So we actually need the stuff that's causing the problem to rebuild the soil. So we need the carbon, and that's why the problem is the solution. And we didn't really know how the soil worked. That's another thing. And that's why microbes today are so important. Microbes in biology are the big thing that makes the difference. Healthy soil is built. Sorry, I have child in the background. I don't know if you can hear that. Healthy soil is built from thin air. So just a reminder here, plants take carbon from carbon dioxide. They pull in carbon through their stomata under their leaves. That's a big word. Google it. Their little mouths. And they pull in carbon from the carbon dioxide. They break off the carbon and they connect that carbon molecule with hydrogen and oxygen from water, H2O, and they make glucose molecules that they mix with the water, and that's what's in a tree. You know when you break a leaf and there's liquid on it, or you tap a tree and there's sap coming out? That liquid is carbon-based liquid. That's what the plant builds itself from. What we didn't know was that liquid, 30 to 40%, oh, sorry, I'm jumping to this. Oh, where's that? There we go. 30 to 40% of those liquid sugars are pumped into the soil to feed microbes. So now we jump back. The plants are pumping in sugar to feed microorganisms. These things you're going to draw today, some of them. And the microorganisms are making minerals and water more available to the plant. So this is what we call the big exchange. Plants pump in liquid sugars that are made of carbon, and the microorganisms make minerals more available. This is the big exchange that stores carbon in the ground. So this mural is so incredible because it's reminding us that while plants are actually the ones doing the pumping of the carbon into the ground, humans, in our interaction, in our new and renewed connection, as many indigenous cultures have had, with being stewards and helping the earth, if we're kissing the ground, if we're getting that intimate and connected and inspired by soil, we're going to see that we can help make this process happen. We can help maximize this process all over the world so that more carbon's being pumped through plants into the ground. We're not literally going to be blowing CO2 into the ground, but this is signifying that humans are going to be what's helping the degraded natural world get back into that process of pumping carbon through plants into the soil. And we can do this if we humble ourselves and connect with nature again. This is another quick zoom in example, again, of making the invisible visible. This is the tip, the very tip of the finest root of a plant. And at that tip, you see the pink hue. That represents all that liquid that's coming out of the plant. Like if you think about a drip line, or imagine that you're bleeding out of your finger, right? If you're bleeding out of your finger, you're exuding blood. So the plant is exuding sugars, and all those microbes are consuming those sugars. And this is a slide that's really saying, I want to change your perspective, using art to change someone's perspective. And here I have to use words. So most people think that plants are just in the ground, or pardon me, think that roots are in the ground to pull up minerals and nutrients and water, because that's what we see, right? But we don't think of roots as givers. We are not checked in to roots being the source of all the life underground. So when we recognize that the roots are giving 30 to 40% of those liquid sugars they create through photosynthesis, pumping them into the ground, all of a sudden we have a changed context. We're thinking of plants and their roots as givers, as the source of the life in the soil. Write this one down. In 1 healthy teaspoon of soil, there can be more organisms than there are people on planet Earth. So this is how and why this is so magical, is when we feed those microbes properly, when we help plants to do it, when we set up our ecosystems to do that, we can have profound life occur. Microbes make nutrients available for the plant. Write this one down too. More than half of the nutrients that are made available to a plant are only made because a microorganism was present doing something, either eating another microorganism or consuming some type of mineral and making that mineral plant available. So when you taste that tomato, kids, or that yummy strawberry, why it tastes better than the one that tastes like cardboard is because microorganisms made the nutrients available to the plant. So when our soil is dead and doesn't have microorganisms, doesn't have life in it, we don't get the nutrients that our bodies need. That's why supporting organic and regenerative farming can be so important, because if you're eating food from dead soil, you don't get those minerals and nutrients. So moms and dads out there, you can taste the difference 9 times out of 10 based on life in the soil. But microbes also grow the soil. When we feed the microbes with the carbon sugars, the liquid carbon sugars that I said pump in, those microorganisms are then built out of carbon because they consumed carbon. So the mycorrhizal fungi that is in the mural, the bacteria, the nematodes, they're all built out of carbon because they consumed carbon, or they consumed things that consumed carbon. And that is how we're storing carbon in the soil. That's the big news, and that's the exciting news that we didn't know in science. And this is an important art piece. This is Elaine Ingham, Dr. Elaine Ingham, who I'm honored to call a friend in this movement. She created this back in the 80s that really changed soil science and people being able to comprehend what was happening under their feet. Before we had the pyramid of animals and trophic levels on land, but until a few decades ago, we didn't have access to what was happening underground. We did not understand this entire ecosystem. So a reminder here, though, is you see the sun giving energy to the plants so that they can take carbon out of the atmosphere and pump it into the ground and also create their roots. And then you have organisms in the soil consuming those very fine roots and consuming those exudates, the carbon sugars that are leaked into the soil, and they become the source of all these other organisms. So when I said there can be more organisms in a teaspoon of healthy soil than people on planet Earth, if you look at this, you get to understand that to sustain and have more life, like birds and bees and deer and cows and chickens, to have more life above ground, we have to have the life in the soil, because ultimately they're providing the base for that life. And this is a process of regeneration. When we have more carbon pumped into the ground, we have more microorganisms who can feed on that liquid carbon. When we have more microorganisms, they create gluey substances. They make the structure of the soil. They rebuild the soil with their glue. When we rebuild the structure of the soil can hold more water. And then the more minerals are made available for the plant. So with more water access and more mineral access, plants can become more prolific, meaning they can get bigger. They can photosynthesize more, which means more carbon pumped in. This is a regenerative feedback loop that can recreate how our soil functions. And you can see the vast difference of degraded soil or healthy aggregated soil on the right. And it's a net carbon. When you get more carbon pumped in, nature designed itself to be able to pump more carbon in, even if carbon is being oxidized. That's a bit more complicated, so we're going to jump over this slide. So we have a choice. And that's what we're saying with this mural is humanity has an opportunity to work with nature and help nature pump more carbon into the ground to feed the very important microbes that are making this all possible. The microbes are what are making that on the right. They glued that together. It kind of looks like I used spray glue, right? Like I made a spray glue and people be like, oh, the roots are holding it together. No, look at those roots. How would those roots hold it together? No, the roots fed the microorganisms who glued that together. Is that incredible? That is an aggregate. On the left, we have dirt or dust, and on the right, we have aggregated healthy soil. We can rebuild soil so it functions again. And that aggregate, like the cup, is designed to hold water and life. And it's all because of the microbes who've evolved for billions of years, or at least 500 million years, to do that. You all can be a part of making this awareness more available to the world. Your art, your inspiration around this idea can be what allows people to see this, allows people to grasp it, allows people to be moved and inspired to get involved. You can take Kiss the Ground soil advocate training to learn about this and learn about how to take your art into this. It's of course Miles took a while back, and we really appreciate when artists get involved with this to really harness this to the world or make it more available. You can go to kisstheground.com and figure out other ways to get involved. I really believe that together we can do this. This isn't going to be just done in policy. This is going to be a cultural phenomenon where we as a world society really start to recognize that there was indigenous knowledge that we left out that is 100% important to incorporate, that there's science that we need to understand and need to integrate into our decisions. And there's ways of thinking holistically that are going to make it so that we can work with nature in our current context and allow for humanity and the earth to thrive. So thank you so much for listening. And I'll take questions at the end of today. So thanks again.
All right. Thank you very much, Finian. So we're going to jump back to our watercolor exercise, where we're going to paint some superheroes of the soil.
Miles, I'm sorry, while you're getting up your screen, I just wanted to reiterate to everybody, if you'd like to turn on your cameras and just kind of be part of this community with us, please do. It's so much nicer to see your beautiful faces than black boxes. If you'd prefer not to, there's no pressure, but feel free to if you'd like.
Okay. So these are three of our models. They are beautiful celebrities. On the right-hand side, you guys might have heard of tardigrades or water bears. That's going to be one of our characters. We've got Copepods in the middle, and we've got Protozoa on the left-hand side. So Protozoa is the biggest family, and they're the smallest. Copepods are kind of like little crustaceans, and tardigrades are micro animals. So they all exist as a part of making soil healthy and making most environments in the world healthy. They exist all around the world in all different kinds of locations. Okay, so these are our models. So very quickly, these are protozoa, single-celled organisms. Gives you a sense of their anatomy right there and some of the varieties. You can see something that's great about these small creatures is that they are very geometric. They make themselves very available to painting and drawing. Copepods here, here's a range of them. So again, they're like little crabs, little lobsters, little crustaceans, and they exist in fresh and salt water all around the world. And they often, if you can find them, they show that an environment is healthy. If they're not in an environment, it typically means that something's going wrong. So they are a large part of sort of the micro animal world. And then tardigrades, which you guys might have heard of. They are very famous because they are extremely resilient and strong, and they can deal with all kinds of things like radiation. They can go into space. They can deal with heat and drought. As some of you guys might know, on Earth, we've had 5 major mass extinctions events within the many hundreds of millions of years that life has been here on Earth. And the tardigrades have survived every one of them. So there's really nobody stronger. They're perhaps the strongest animal on Earth. So you guys will have the option of painting any one of these guys. And that's a little illustration of all these creatures together underfoot. All right, so these are my materials when I'm painting. So you guys can use whatever you've got, but this is a good basic watercolor setup. We've got a sketchbook, pencil, a rag, water, cup of water, and brushes and pens, and a palette, of course, with paint. And these are the paints right here. So these are the brushes that I recommend. So again, if you guys are interested in watercolor and getting deeper into watercolor, these are 3 really good types of brushes to use. Square tip is great for texture and for filling in little sort of tight and linear areas. The round tip is really good for putting down big washes of color. And the liner brush is really good for line work and detail and some kinds of texture. Okay, so that is the technical starter. And then I will quickly run through what my sequence looks like. And what we're going to do is sort of set it up so that for the next 35, 40 minutes, you guys are painting. I will be here sort of moving through each one of these stages, every 5 minutes or 6 minutes or so. And you guys will be able to paint your own from the characters that you have at the bottom of the screen. And then at the end, we'll look at them together. If you have any questions while we're moving through, feel free to ask. But quickly, what our sequence looks like is you start with a line drawing, of course. You do first color wash and shadows. So on the left-hand side, you can see I did sort of an overall blue. For the tardigrade, I did a green shadow. And then for the copepod, I did overall coloring. I sort of colored each section of his body. Second wash and starting patterns. So with the second wash, you can see I did a full sort of earth tone brown or orange over the tardigrade. I started putting in some of the dots or the organs for the protozoa. And then for the copepod, I started putting in some patterns on the right-hand side in the antenna. Third wash and volume. So a wonderful thing about watercolor is that it is transparent, which is very appropriate for all of our creatures here who have some degree of transparency and multiple colors layered over each other. So when I'm going for volume, what I do is I get usually a warm, if I have a warm color, I get a cool color and put that over the warm. Or if I have a warm color, if I have a cool color rather, I get a warm color and put that over the cool. And you can put those wherever you want. I put them on the underside, you can put them on the side, you can put them on the top. And together, when you pattern that out, it starts to create a sense of volume. So here's my texture portion. So for the protozoa, as you can see from our photographs here, from the protozoa, the tardigrade, and the copepod, there are these little textured areas where you have all kinds of, like flesh and fluids and organs layered on top of one another. And there's a lot of detail, but a good way of suggesting that detail is to get a little bit of dry paint, get some paint on your brush, take some of the water off using your rag, and just sort of lightly, dryly put it on your picture. And that's going to give you sort of layers that will look like, it will look like a surface, right? So once you have volume, you can put a surface on that volume. And then the last element I did here is color outlines and motion lines. So you can see for my protozoa, I did these color outlines, just choosing whatever colors I wanted. You know, the color of these things varies all over the place. Some of them are totally colorless. So when we're using color, just like with that human cell image, what we're trying to do is make it exciting, pull people into it. Because like what Finian was describing, like when you look at dirt and you look at soil, the difference between the two can be like, so what? You know, what's the big difference? But when you get up close, when you get people into thinking about the difference between the two, it's everything. It's the difference between being a skeleton and being a human being, pretty much entirely, right? Being a living human being. So that's what we're trying to do when we're looking at these guys. All right, so we're going to start off with stage one. So you got your models right there. They're completely still. They're professionals. And you can begin with your line drawing, put in whatever patterns make sense to you. As you can see, with my protozoa, I didn't put in all of the circles. Oh, and just to repeat, you guys only need to choose one of these. So whichever one you want to do, you can put it in any position you want. You can shift them however you want. As you can see with my protozoa here, he's pretty much an oval. I can make him a circle. I can make him more of a blob. The tardigrade, you can see that I put him up here so we had all of his arms sort of waving out at us, rather than just horizontal. And then with the copepod, there are all kinds of little chambers that make up the body of the copepod. And I decided to just put in this one sort of central element in my line drawing. And then I would build up those different chambers of the copepod using color rather than the line drawing, okay? So when preparing for a watercolor, you don't need to draw everything usually. You just need to draw enough so that you have a clean, clear space to begin putting your color down. All right. Does anybody have any questions as you're getting going about, you know, handling paint or really anything within what I've said? I think it's pretty clear. So, all right. Great. So we're going to stay on this image for 4 minutes or so. You guys are welcome. If you're faster, if you're slower, it's all fine. You know, you got the pictures here, the photographs of the creatures. So you can go at whatever speed makes sense for you. You can make a fun illustration out of it, or you can just do sort of like a scientific diagram. So it's totally up to you. And at the end, if you guys want to, you can put your images up and we will look at them collectively and take a picture of them as a group.
And just to mention to everybody, this time where you're drawing is a perfect time if you have any questions, if you just want to chat about anything, art or environmental advocacy or soil, please just unmute and we can chat.
Oh, and Aaron, if you want to repaste those resources, I just sort of take them from the top and put them at the bottom. I can just quickly go over what you guys can look at after this workshop. So as Aaron described at the beginning, if any of you guys are interested in art classes generally, drawing and painting, college prep, figure drawing, all those things, you can find us at valleyartacademy.org. Again, this will be in the chat box, so you can find it all there. There's a great map that shows you all of the different farms that you can buy food from that are practicing these principles. That when they are growing food, they are focusing on the soil. They're making the whole environment healthy. And that's a great thing to support and a great thing to find. And like Finian was saying, it often tastes a lot better. And they're often producing interesting types of foods as well. So you can find that map in the link. If you guys are really excited about these little creatures, there is a wonderful YouTube video, or YouTube channel rather, that is, I think, owned by CuriosityStream. If any of you guys follow that. It's called Journey to the Microcosmos. And they're all different little videos about these creatures and what they do, all types, right? So all the creatures that we have covered here are covered in those videos. And you can see them moving around. You can see all kinds of descriptions for them. And I think the last one was, if any of you guys are interested in watching the movie that just came out, or came out at the end of last year, it's on Netflix, Kiss the Ground. You can learn more about this subject. It's a really important kind of information to get out there. And also for any adults or teens, if you want to become a soil advocate, If you want to learn more about the subject, it's just really scientifically interesting, and you want to advocate for this change so that we're taking care of our land a lot better, you can find how to do that, where to take that course at kisstheground.com as well. Okay, so I'll leave the line drawing up for another minute or two, and then we will shift over to our first washes. Like Finian was saying, a big part of how we create an affection for a creature or for anything on this planet is through how we make an image of it or how we document it. So I'm sure all of you guys love animals, and I'm sure that there are some animals that perhaps you love more. So think of all the animals that were pictured in your childhood, like all the pandas. Sloths are very popular, right? People love them. Whales and dolphins, cats and dogs, of course, who we interact with often on a daily basis. Penguins, people love. You know, all these creatures that mean a lot to us, right? And so when we're talking about saving a creature, you know, that might be threatened by extinction, or saving an environment, it's so important to have something that we're able to relate to. Something like even something that anthropomorphizes the creatures too. And what I mean by that is makes them more like relatable human beings. A good example is Finding Nemo, right? Where you have all of these ocean creatures that are involved in a very human activity of trying to save another creature, right? And it makes them relatable. It makes them lovable, and it makes us feel closer to them. It's a great thing that, even though it's a great story and people love Finding Nemo because it's funny and enjoyable, it also brings us closer to nature. So a great way, if you guys love doing art and you love drawing and painting, to pull people in to something that's important is to make pictures of it. It's an ancient human activity that tends to work. You know, it's easy to say things. Words are kind of cheap. You know, like, you know, we have to do something. You know, climate change is a problem. You know, you can read this book about these creatures, but once you have images, once you have video, once you have animation, once you have stories, stories are so important. Once you have stories, it really helps you to live in that world and to get closer to them. Okay, so I'm going to shift to stage 2 here. So you still have all your photographs there, and you can see on the left-hand side, what I chose to do when I put that blue wash on the protozoa is I used it kind of dryly. I didn't want to fill it up completely in blue. I wanted there to be some texture there already for when I put on other layers. So that's a technique you can use. You can use it for any creature that you've chosen. With the tardigrade, again, I chose that undershadow with the green. So that is a good way to do any kind of picture, whether you're doing a copepod or the protozoa or the character himself. And of course, the copepod, it's a full color layering where I chose one color or a set of colors for different parts of the creature. These are all good basic techniques for doing watercolor, whatever you're painting. So if you guys like doing portraits or landscapes, if you like doing abstract watercolors, whatever you choose to do, these techniques will be useful for that area too, okay? So I think I'll leave this one up because this should be a pretty quick one. I'm going to leave this one up for another minute or so, or 2 minutes. Another thing that's really amazing about these creatures is that they're all of different sizes And even if one creature is more complex or less complex than another, like it has more cells or less cells, sometimes their sizes don't always match up. So the tardigrade here is made up, he's an animal, and he's made up of thousands and thousands of cells. But then there are other microorganisms called like stentors and amoebas and stuff like that, that are one cell, but they're bigger than this guy. Right? So it's really, really fascinating. It's almost like learning about an alien planet when you learn about these microorganisms. But you can also think about them as our sort of grandpas and grandmas, because they go all the way back, right? The only reason that we exist is because of all these small creatures that exist in the soil and exist in the waters. So getting to know them a little bit better is really getting to know a part of your family that you probably haven't thought about for a long time. So there's that. I'm going to jump over to the next one. So to describe what I've done here with my second wash, as you can see on the protozoa here, if we look between, I put in a little bit of blue around the ring of the protozoa to create a sense of depth and to create some interest with the blue. And then I started using that same blue to fill in some of the organ shapes. So what I gave myself was 3 kinds of uses of blue. There's that first wash where I have these open white areas. And then the second wash and the patterns where I have a few blue organs and I have some blue sort of smudged into or washed into the outline of the creature. For the tardigrade, I did something which is very often done in watercolor, where you do an overall wash to give something an overall color or atmosphere. So as you can tell, this sort of earthy orange color that I've used mixed in with the green. Like if we look at those two together, you can see that's the green without the orange. And then with the orange, it sort of brings it in, it sort of sucks it up and sinks it into one complete color identity. When we're looking at the copepod here, I decided to do the little organs and egg sacs and little things that go into the copepod by just a sort of squiggly line that I did all the way around, and you can see the difference between the two. Right, there's nothing there, and then there's something. And then I also put in a little bit of basic texture there in the antenna. So you guys choose what you want to do. Again, you can use the techniques that I've used for the copepod on the tardigrade, or the techniques I used for the tardigrade on the copepod, et cetera, et cetera. Feel free to mix and match. Painting these microorganisms is a little bit like painting plants in that they don't need to look absolutely perfect, because the only thing that really needs to look very perfect for us to believe it is architecture, usually. You know, if you're drawing a building and it looks a little bit off, you can kind of tell. You can tell that it's not going to work. And if you draw a portrait and it doesn't quite look like the person, you can really, really tell. But with these little creatures or with plants, they can kind of be all kinds of shapes. And so it's a great place to just play around with techniques and not feel stressed out by it looking exactly like something. So we'll take another minute there. I'm going to quickly run to the bathroom and I'll be right back. I've been trying to think of big stories that have been done with microorganisms. The only one that I can really think of is Osmosis Jones. Does anybody remember that? That movie from like 20 years ago? Does anybody else have any examples of like a story that's based on microscopic creatures? Within SpongeBob SquarePants, Plankton is actually a copepod. I don't know if you guys know that, but he's actually one of these creatures that we have here. But I think that would be such a rich area for some of these animators to work in. Like you could have a Pixar movie that's completely based in the micro world.
That would be so cool.
They do a really good job of that, of course.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm surprised there hasn't been more, but
well, you remember Osmosis Jones, right?
I do. Yeah, I don't think I ever saw it, but I do remember the movie came out. But yeah, it was quite a while ago, right?
Yeah, I think that was 20 years ago. I think Chris Rock was Osmosis Jones. I forget. But it was, you know, it's inside the body, right? He's like a white blood cell or something, fighting a virus. And I remember there's a magic school bus where they go inside the body.
Oh, well, the Magic School Bus is just classic.
Yeah, they do some things like that.
Karen's shaking her head. Yeah, I feel like it's our generation that remembers that.
Yeah, but
the younger ones, if you haven't seen the Magic School Bus or read it, or you aren't familiar, definitely give it a Google search.
Yeah,
I don't know. They think it's cool. I don't know. We thought.
Well, there've been new. I mean, for any of the kids here, anybody who's like 12, 13, 14, like
Yeah.
What is the big like kids science show now? Is there one? Do you guys have anything to say on that?
John, Victoria, David, I see you all. Yeah, you're the teens we're talking to. Do you know of anything?
It might be more YouTube now.
Yeah, maybe.
There's just so much content available.
When I was a kid, we watched Sid the Science Kid. That's what I remember. But that's about
you guys know about Bill and I the Science Guy, right? So I think he kind of made a leap where he's remained in popular culture.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to shift to stage 4 here. So this is the volume edition. So like I was saying when I first introduced this stage, so much of creating volume is about one or a few delicate washes that you place over that coloring that you've already put down on your surface or put down on your creature. So you can see with the tardigrade here, these big blue washes that create just a basic sense of three-dimensionality. The same thing, of course, is happening here in the copepod. You know, just with that little red wash, you guys can see the difference. It goes from being completely two-dimensional, a two-dimensional pattern, to being something that has a basic three-dimensionality. So that's what we're going for here. With these little organs, I didn't do as much sort of 3D stuff with the protozoa here, but you know, you could do the same thing where you put a little wash underneath each one of those organs.
Just quickly, a little off topic, but I'm curious where everybody is in the country. If you want to just go ahead and put it in the chat real quick where you're located, that would be so cool to see. I don't want to take away from your art making though. That's the most important thing here.
I'm from Argentina, actually.
Oh, really? Argentina.
Awesome, Victoria.
Yeah.
You're in Argentina. I think I saw your RSVP and I was like, wow. That's great.
Yeah, I'm moving to Los Angeles to study multimedia, but I heard of this course and I like it, so I just sang in.
Great.
That's amazing. Where in Argentina are you?
I'm from Mar del Plata. It's near Buenos Aires.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I would love to visit.
Yeah, it's lovely here.
I bet.
Oh,
It's far away, but yeah, it's okay.
So John, so do you pronounce it Markleville?
Yeah, it's really small. I think there's probably 1,000 people here. It's a bunch of cornfields.
How did you hear about this little class?
From the Kiss the Ground Instagram page.
Cool.
I saw a story, yeah.
What got you interested in that?
Well, I liked gardening, and then there's fields everywhere, so
Right.
it's kind
Got a
of,
lot of land.
yeah. And then I saw the Kiss the Ground movie on Netflix, and it kind of got me, it was kind of confused me, because all these fields are just empty half of the year.
Right.
and it just, I don't know, it kind of made me, I don't know, I wanted to learn more because I was just wondering why none of these farmers are doing anything about that.
Sure. Yeah, there, as you saw in the movie, there are a lot of reasons why those fields are left open like that, and why corn and soy and other things are such major products in Indiana and other states. But I think something that might be of particular interest to you is that regenerative agriculture map that is there in the chat, where you might be able to find some operations near you in Indiana or the neighboring states that are doing it in a different way, or that are moving in this direction. And you can check in with them and just see, like, how do you become a part of it, or just that's a great sort of next step in studying those things.
That's so cool, John. Thanks for
Yeah,
joining us.
thank you for sharing.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, what you learned in the movie and the workshop here and art making and spread it a bit. That's really exciting. And Cheryl said Chicago and sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, but she's here in LA, and Karen is San Fernando Valley, another Valley girl like me. Well, thanks y'all for being here. I guess my y'all right there was not very Valley, but other than that, you know,
It's been adopted.
Valley girl.
It's been adopted. So
Yeah.
stage 5 is texture. So as you guys see here with my three characters. So what I decided to do is get a very sort of dry blue texture on my brush, or dry blue paint on my brush, and I was just lightly scratching it over the paper in order to create that sense of overall texture. As we can see in the picture of the protozoa, it has a lot of little bumps on it. Actually, if we could see very, very closely, it is covered in little hairs, which are called cilia, which allow it to move around. They're like a million little paddles that it uses to move all over the place. So I'm not going to be able to paint a million little paddles, but I can create a basic overall sense of texture. It gets us closer to the experience of what a protozoa would look like. And then the tardigrade and the copepod there, they have their own textures, of course. I decided to get a very sort of heavy and dry red, or dark red, that I used around the tardigrade in order to make those dense shadows. I left those open blue areas, those big washes. And you can see, I guess you guys can see my cursor going over the image. You can see how when I put in this dry brushed blue and red, the way that it works next to the water, or to the big blue wash here, is it creates a sense of depth immediately, right? It creates that sort of transition feeling of moving around the form. So again, this is totally usable, whatever kind of watercolor you choose to do after these sort of scientific watercolors. And then with the tardigrade, I just a little bit of dry brush as well, putting in some of those little dark red splotches that you see underneath the big sort of circular sections of the copepod. And you have this big sort of wave of blue that goes over the central area. Okay, so we'll take another, I guess, 20 seconds on this, and then we will go to our last slide. Okay, so there's the final with the outlines and the motion lines. You can see, especially with the tardigrade, when I jump between the previous slide, the previous slide and this slide, just gives it a lot more definition. With watercolor, you absolutely don't need to use outlines, but I think in this case, it helps a little bit for the visual impact. And you can see that for the copepod as well, as we look at the outside of the creature. Makes it a little more intense. And also for the protozoa, it helps to define some of those interior areas, you know, these different organ areas within the cell. The motion lines, which of course we don't see in the photograph, of the images or of the creatures, I think are nice to bring in because, of course, they create a sense of story. Whenever you're adding motion, or not always, but often when you're adding motion, you're creating a sense of moving from somewhere to somewhere, right? It's a trajectory from and to. And so with all of these creatures who are moving through liquids for the most part, I wanted to create a sense of them existing within a world that they can navigate. So if I were to make, a storybook with these creatures, I might use these motion lines in order to take us from one part or the beginning of the story to the end of the story. And we'll take, I guess, another 2 minutes with this one. And then we're really at the end of the workshop. And I'm here to answer any questions. If anybody has any questions artistically or scientifically, or about ways to get involved in these things, or to get better at watercolor, or to study art in general, any of this subject matter I can help with.
Miles, yesterday, during yesterday's workshop, we talked a little bit just about composting, and I thought that was such a cool conversation to have. I think that there's a lot of kind of questions, at least there was for me. I shouldn't assume. I should say that after I learned more about, the environment and soil, and it was difficult for me to kind of pinpoint like what actionable steps I could take right away that could really do something, that I could be a part of the betterment. And I think that, it can be a little overwhelming once you've learned all of this information. Like, how do I get started? Where do I start? And something that, you and I talked about a few years ago was really composting, and how truly easy it is. Oh, Finian's back. Finian, I was just saying that yesterday, the conversation that we had just casually about composting, I just thought was so cool. And I wanted to chat about it a little bit and just kind of share some info from all of us. I was saying that
Sure.
when I started to learn more and more about this, I didn't really know where to start, like where I could take actionable steps in my own small way that could make a difference somehow. And I think that, starting my first apartment compost, and just learning more and watching that process and being able to see things happen before my eyes. And then now my backyard compost and a small little garden, like these things were so cool to, again, to just kind of feel like I'm part of it. Like, does anybody, part of this workshop, has anybody kind of delved into that a bit? Anybody started their first compost?
Thank you, Erin, for bringing that up. A bunch of artists are on the call here, so I think you all are probably more aware than others of watching your progress and being able to track your progress in art, right? You can see what it looked like 2 years ago when you drew a face or eyes or whatever it is, and you can track that progress and your ability to do it fluently, to do it without frustration, to do it seamlessly. And that learning curve is in everything. And so composting or home gardening, these things are slightly intimidating at first, but today we have probably the same as sometimes you can find tutorials of or workshops like Miles is doing online these days that are more available, videos for helping you compost, whether it's through Kiss the Ground or just on YouTube, looking up ways to get started. You can do that, and then the frustration or the fear around it will fade very quickly, because even if you slightly fail, there's ways to look up and find out what you did wrong or find out how to adjust that. And so I just wanted to presence that this crowd definitely has seen their own progress, and you can have that same thing happen, and then all of a sudden gardening feels exciting. It doesn't feel like, oh, what if I fail? It doesn't matter. You know what not doing it perfect looks like with art. and getting better, and it's okay if it's a little messy, and progress and progress and progress. So really encouraging people to step into trying to compost at home in some way, or looking at how they can participate in their city's program.
Well, it's also really transformational when you have like a banana peel and you realize that this is energy, right? Like this is a ball of energy. This is not garbage, right? It's not actually waste, right? This is going to, you can, put it under a rose bush, you sort of dig it into the soil under a rose bush or something, and it is feeding that rose bush, right? It is a continuous cycle that you can participate in, and that you can reconnect, because so much of the reason that we don't compost, of course, composting happens naturally and has always happened universally, but composting helps you to reconnect to the earth in the most direct way, because we all produce food waste or some paper waste or whatever it is, and being able to re-deliver that to the earth, I think, is a really great way to honor it. So
Yeah,
for
yes.
I'm going to say,
Go ahead.
Cheryl, go ahead, please.
this is Cheryl. We have 3 compost bins in our backyard.
Oh, great.
Quite a few years ago, the city had this special program, and we went to some forest preserve, and they had these compost bins for really reasonable price. They had big trucks, and people were just like crazy going there. So we got 2 then, and I bought another one that you can rotate around. And we did worm composting for a while, but that was like, we really had to keep up with that. That was a little bit tricky.
A bit higher management level.
Yeah.
For worm bins,
But
for sure.
yeah, we've been composting for years, and yeah, I'm growing sprouts now all the time.
Cool.
Wonderful.
Great.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is at all, like, Finny, and you might roll your eyes, but I don't know if this is at all correct, but when I moved into the house that I'm in now, and I had my first backyard, really, and like space to kind of do something, I literally dug a hole. Like, I dug a hole, I tilled the ground, right? And I just started putting in, I dug it deep enough that it could also be covered with like leaves and browns, which I later learned was necessary. But I just knew that I didn't want the food waste to go into the trash can, but I didn't really know what else to do with it. And
that's perfect. That's, Aaron, that the necessity of browns is mostly when you have high nitrogen content material, like food scraps that are high in nitrogen, and the browns, like leaves or paper or sawdust or something, those are things that have more carbon, a higher carbon ratio. So you're balancing it. And mostly what that does is make it so anaerobic digestion doesn't happen. That's a fancy word for slimy compost that smells terrible. That's basically decomposing without enough air. So anaerobic is decomposing without enough air. Aerobic is decomposing with enough air. So when you dig a hole, the amount of soil biology and what's already available in the soil and covering it up, even if it does a little bit of anaerobic digestion, you're not going to smell that, and you're not going to be faced with that. So totally great method if you don't have a bin, if you have enough space to do the holes. And lo and behold, you'll probably see those areas of your yard becoming more fertile over time. One thing I want to mention, what Miles mentioned, is like, everyone here knows about composition. You're composing art. You're making something. It's coming to life, so to speak. When we deal with a compost situation, when we're giving it enough water, when we're providing it with these banana peels or whatnot, you're giving access and the conditions for life to proliferate. And as I mentioned in my little speech before, it's like the life begets life. So it's not just a banana peel. When you give a banana peel to the earth, you're giving it to these microbes, some of which you're drawing today, and making it so that they have not only the food source, but the conditions to proliferate. When they proliferate, other organisms can live in that system, and all of a sudden we're building a substance that's really beneficial to use on other plants. We're recomposing. We are composing something in the decomposition process. So composting is composing while it's decomposing. It's turning into more life and more nutrients, something that was otherwise sitting there and could have dried up or turned into methane in the landfill.
Great. And so I think everybody should have reached the end of their watercolors. Maybe we can do our final pick.
Yeah, let's see everybody's artwork.
Yeah. So again, just as a recap, so we've reached the end of the workshop. Thank you everybody for coming. Find out more about all these subjects and through those resource links. And if you have any questions about any of this stuff, you can follow up with us. And we would so love it if you guys would, like I will now.
Well, unshare. Sorry, Miles, unshare your screen first so we can get everybody to come up if they'd like. And yeah, if y'all would put up your artwork for us, I'm going to take a screenshot. We'll put it up on social media. Anybody else want to join us?
I love your tardigrade, David.
Yeah, those look so great.
Wow, really
didn't get done because I had to take a break. Sorry.
No problem.
No problem.
And mine are not in a straight line. I can't do that.
Hey, David, raise yours up just a little bit so we see. There you go. All right, anybody else want to join? I'm going to take the picture. These are great. All different kinds of watercolor technique. John, yours is really excellent. Wow. All right, one more. That's good watercolor. One more.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Nice.
Beautiful, Jackie. Beautiful work, everyone.
Yeah,
really
these look awesome, Jackie. And
Victoria, really wow.
Yeah, Jack, you did all three. A bunch of you guys did a lot of them. Victoria, you did all three of them connected to each other. Hugging?
Oh,
all of them hugging.
And again, sorry if that's not the right way to pronounce your name. I apologize, but look at the family. That's awesome. All three of you.
That's actually my friend Mayuko and her kids.
Yep.
Yeah.
Rad.
Great work.
Awesome.
Karen, beautiful. Wow. Everybody, really good. Good stuff.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for joining. Oh.
Any questions on soil that anyone had that I might have missed that we needed to address? Anyone have any questions about any of the things I brought up?
Feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like.
Actually, John, this might be an interesting intersection here. So John lives in Indiana, and he watched the Kiss the Ground documentary, and he noticed what farm practices look like in his area. He lives in a smaller part of Indiana. And I was saying that a good way to look at some of what might be happening regeneratively is looking at that Regeneration International map. Do you have any recommendations for him at looking at what regeneration looks like in the Midwest or in the Indiana area?
You're in Indiana, John?
Yeah.
I was just a gentleman named Rick Clark, YouTube Rick Clark. He's probably one of the most prolific row crop farmers in regenerative agriculture right now, who is doing no-till and cover cropping without any glyphosate or anything else, using roller crimpers and having amazing economical advantages over other farmers. He's saving on 7,000 acres, John. He's saving about $860,000 a year saving on input costs. So this is an incredible opportunity for farmers to start adopting this type of practice that he trains people in Indiana to do. So I'm introducing him with top legislators, top people in President Biden's cabinet, and we're really getting his voice heard. So Indiana is very strongly represented right now in terms of regenerative agriculture. So check out Rick Clark and just look up Rick Clark, regenerative farmer in Indiana in YouTube, and you'll be able to find him and start sharing his videos with farmers in your community so they can see how much of an economic benefit this is for them.
Awesome.
It sounds like an internship. Might be in your future.
Totally.
But,
hopefully.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing.
Thank you, guys.
Sure.
Well, thank you all so much. Thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed it. Please continue to be in touch. We actually, like I mentioned at the beginning of the session, this is a series of workshops. We have another mural coming up. Oh, there we go. I see another one from PJ.
Beautiful.
Cool.
Great. Excellent.
We have another series of workshops coming up in the next month or so with another Los Angeles-based mural going up. So we definitely want you guys to stick with us and keep checking back and join us for more. We'd love.
Yes, what we'll be doing in that workshop is native California plant watercolors. So it'll be beautiful flowers and foliage. So just stay tuned. You'll hear about it from 11/11. And if you enjoyed this, you can learn more about all that stuff. And we'll be doing it with the Theodore Payne Foundation, which works on native plants. So even if you're not in California, native plants are a beautiful thing to support wherever you happen to be in the world. And so you can learn about what that looks like here in Southern California and what that can look like where you happen to be. Okay.
And
Thanks,
again,
everyone.
sorry, just another little aside, Jackie, fellow Valley girl, if you want to come volunteer to paint on the mural with us and join us in person, you're welcome to. So keep in touch.
Yeah,
Yes.
definitely. Thanks.
Cool. All right, everybody, have a wonderful rest of
Bye.
the weekend. See you soon.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.